So I was thinking about it, and with everyone staying apart and distancing, it's not really a good opportunity, at least in the way I do things, to kind of just talk and share what's going on and, you know, what I'm doing. So I decided I'd make a video kind of going over some of the stuff that I've been doing in my spare time. Kind of some of the projects. And one of the things I've been doing over the past 6, 7, 8 months is making prop replicas. Going through what I have, I've started projects, all the way back to 2014, 2015, never got around to them again. But of the ones I've finished, this is probably the oldest, the one I've been working on the longest. And this was just a clock to kind of match the one used in the Back to the Future movie that was on the dashboard of the car, back in the first one. I wasn't able to find one of these clocks available anywhere, and wanted to make a version that was just kind of simple. So while walking through IKEA a couple years ago, I ran across this alarm clock, vintage looking alarm clock that was pretty cheap, I don't know, $5 or something. So I picked it up and took it apart and ended up just painting the enclosure. And I found an image of the actual clock face online, photoshopped out the hands. There's still a problem with some glare you can see at the top. It's kind of whitish, but it's not a very accurate replica anyways. But I ended up printing that out. Just painted the whole thing with spray paint, and then printed that out. The hands, I was going to 3D print some hands that better matched, but I did not end up doing that. Just figured this was kind of good enough for me, so that's what I first did. So one of the next things I decided to work on was this Spirit Halloween Proton Pack. So I ended up getting this Black Friday of 2019, and I saw some guys at Maker Faire had one. They said that it was, they had built their own full replicas, but they were big and heavy, and this was, they recommended this as a good starting point. Well, when I got it, I never really opened it, just kind of left it in the box. And then when we were all locked down this summer, I thought it could be cool to get it out and try it out. And I was pretty underwhelmed with the whole thing. It didn't do a whole bunch. It didn't really look that good. So I ended up spending a bunch of time modifying this one. So, things that were modified on it. I added this. This wasn't there. Some sort of square at the bottom. I just 3D printed it and then epoxied it in. So you can't tell. It looks like a single piece. I removed the straps. I put them on a mock-up Alice frame. They use these backpack frames for the real ones called Alice frames, but I don't want to buy one. They're kind of expensive. Now this is a washer off of something. This is a screw, I think, off a computer rack. In here, these little vents. A lot of people make these active. I didn't. I just had some screen repair. So it's white backed and adhesive. I just kind of stuck those in there. I changed all the stickers out because I ended up taking everything off the entire pack and repainting it black. There's also a seam. This was a 2-piece mold. So I ended up essentially bondoing. I used plastic epoxy to fill all the cracks and then sanded it down. I ended up, I don't remember what they call it, but there's this little ion wand or something. I had a black powder pistol loading rod that I just hammered down, drilled and tapped, put that on there. Changed out some of these hoses for more accurate ones. I used hot glue to kind of look like a weld around some of these areas here. Again, kind of filled and stuff. I got a different cable. This one looks much more accurate. The other one was kind of lame. I made a different attachment point for the wand to stick on. But I guess most of what I did was with the wand itself. So this is the wand it came with after heavy modification. These weren't covered. This was all just one color essentially. I think This may have been red. I'm not sure. One of these was red, but the stickers were few and far between. So I ended up taking the whole thing apart, cut this opening out, painted the parts individually, put all these stickers on there, and then if you turn it on, which let's come over here, find the battery pack. If you turn it on, it will do this now. So the tip flashes, it makes sound, and it flashes there. But that's all it does, and that's kind of lame. I took off the mounting point there, but I didn't want to just discard this, so I ended up just removing it entirely from the pack and kind of made it a standalone device. So now it's just got its own hose, and I kept the battery pack and everything in there. And then I made a whole new wand, which is essentially 3D printed for the most part. So all this is 3D printed. The only things that aren't 3D printed, this switch, these switches, this tube, and then some of these lights here, like these barbs are 3D printed, heat sinks 3D printed, all these parts are 3D printed. I would say, you know, this is 3D printed. The screws aren't, but it's mostly FDM 3D printed, and then there's a lot of the higher detail parts are SLA 3D printed. And I ended up redoing all the electronics, so this actually houses an Arduino Pro Mini along with some lights and stuff. I'll turn it on. I have it using a DC-DC voltage converter inside the main pack here, so I can put any sort of input voltage into what I want, but I have it running off 4 AA batteries right now. So you turn it on with this. Nope, I always mess that up. You turn it on with this, you'll have some flashing here, and then once it's fully up, you'll have these go. So I'll do it again. You have the power down and power up sequence. So these kind of fade in. These are NeoPixels, single pixels. This is a NeoPixel board there. And it just strobes. And then you turn on the wand with this one, and you get that light, you get this light, and this bar pulses. And then when you fire it, the end will light up and it makes sounds. Those bars move back and forth. When it goes into overload, you'll see that light there flashes, and then it'll shut back down. If you overload it, overheat it, it'll have to recharge here. And then, as I did before, you turn that on. It's a little quiet, but it does the Ghostbusters theme song. So turn all this off. So that's the pack. It's based off of some stuff that I saw online. So I got most of these models from one guy who did it. He designed it. I just, 3D printed. I made some changes. This is actually from his design, but this tube here is, I think, a glitter tube. These stickers I purchased just because I didn't have any way to print on that color, that shiny background. But everything else there is pretty much the same. The code's pretty much the same on the Arduino. I've got an Adafruit soundboard in here that runs all the sounds. It talks over the I2C bus to that. And the only issue I have, if we turn it over here, I kept the main board. I installed 2 speakers here. They're out of an old TV. And then this is just a piece of PVC that I bent. I just had a piece around in the basement. I put some pipe insulation on there. These are the original straps that normally attach in here. I filled those, if you look in here, I filled those up with epoxy, so you can't really get in there. And then this is a piece of aluminum. I just cut that and put that in there. So yeah, if you look down in here, you can actually see how I glued that in there. I didn't finish the back because no one's going to see the back. The only issue I have right now is that the sound's kind of quiet. I was expecting it to be a little bit louder. I don't know if I have the wrong speakers in there or what, but I might put a bigger amplifier in. get that going. But yeah, there's actually not much in here at all. It's everything's in here. I used a Cat5 cable. I wanted to keep the conductor count down to 8, so using a Cat5 cable allowed me to do that, but most of the stuff was inside of the wand rather than the pack itself, so that's why most of the electronics live in there. But that was that next project. Sticking with the Ghostbusters theme, the next thing I did with this Ecto goggles, and they're just based off a Weller gas welding mask. So this just flips up. Pop this out. This would be where you'd put your tint lens or magnifier or whatever. So this is just a FDM 3D printed base, spray painted at silver, and then these are SLA printed eyepieces that are just glued on there, and I just painted them. I'm gonna put lights in here at some point. I just haven't done that yet. Gonna figure out, where I want to put it, and the batteries and so forth. So that just pops in there. That, put that down. Did a pair of the elbow pads. So these are lacrosse knee pads, just painted with fabric paint, spray paint. Did the belt and the PKE meter holster. This is a Husky tape measure holder. The handle's a little bit too big to fit, so I had to open that up. I made 2 of them because I've got 2 meters. This one is a Ruby's meter. All I did was take it apart. I ended up filling in the bottom. It has a little hook that goes on the back, which kind of sucks. Looks like it's going to break off in my opinion, so cut all that out, sanded it, and then I used like modeling clay to make an impression mold, scooted it up, and then epoxy filled that. And then I used, again, rub and buff for the shinier parts. I experimented with putting some lines in the graph. That didn't work out too well. Painted the arms, got a little bit of wear on them, but otherwise it works. It's just fine. So we got that. This one, however, is based on another model I found online. I liked this one because it didn't have all the LEDs in it. I thought it was kind of neat with the display. So this is an entirely 3D printed enclosure. You can pick 2 different settings there. The buttons are 3D printed, the arms are 3D printed. Inside you've got an Arduino Pro Mini, an OLED screen, the little beepers off a motherboard, and then there's, I think, 4 AAA batteries inside the handle here. This is actually printed in 2 pieces since my SLA printer's not that big. Right here they're actually adhered together. You can't really see it on the back, maybe a little bit, but they're just, glued together and then sanded. So those go in the holsters. So the next thing I have, this is the next thing I did with these time circuits. So they're, again, a 3D printed design I found online. They're not really true to the movie because these dates are displays numerals and not alphabet characters. But it was an easy design. So this, again, was from online. 3D printed, glued together. The colors aren't great on these prints. I just printed with a color laser printer and used some Super 77 to stick them on. This all runs on USB. So I got my little USB pack here. If I plug this in, it'll boot up. Top and bottom dates are hard-coded. Middle date should be the actual time. So I do have to make a change to the code. It's using a 24-hour clock on this, so I'll have to change that, but I just haven't gotten around to it. But it works fine. This design uses, again, a Pro Mini hooked up, talking serially to these, so each box is a separate chain using a different digital, and then that displays the dates. The top and bottom PM lights are hardwired, the middle one's controlled. But yeah, there's a real-time clock module inside. It runs on a CR2032. All this pops give. I just put these back. I just pushed them on there so there's the friction fits. They pop off. You need to get in there for any reason. But and then it's just an old USB cord. I like using USB for power since I got these power banks, and USB is pretty ubiquitous. On the same theme, I had made one of these. So this is again from the Back to the Future. This would be on the dash. So this is a speedometer module. It does a self-test at 88, and then it does the 0, with 2 dots. Those 2 dots signify that it has not acquired a GPS signal, so this uses a GPS to do speed. So you got a Pro Mini inside. It's just a hobby box from Amazon. I found a design online where someone did this. Theirs actually interfaced with the car using ODB2. I didn't like that because I didn't want to have to hook it up to my car to have my port used. So GPS seemed like the way to go for me. So I just wrote the software to do that. You know, some labels on there. The last digit of this, I don't remember I wired it or not, but I think that's not used, and I think they actually covered it up with some tape. I figured I'd leave it in there in case I wanted to use it in the future, but it only records to the mile per hour. There's no fractional portions of that. So, and I realized the back connection isn't right. Again, I had this old USB serial converter, but it was one of those knockoff ones, and now the drivers disable it, so I just used it as essentially a USB cable that runs in here, runs that. I've tested it out, driven around my car, seems to work pretty well. Sticking on that same theme, this is one I did actually really recently, working on another project in the basement, and I had this left over from it. I'm not done with it yet, but I wanted to find something that I could do with it. So I figured these ESP32 modules were out there. I got an ESP32 camera module. I think I want to put a sticker on here. I 3D printed it, but my printer's been having trouble, so it didn't come out real well. But essentially there's an ESP32 camera module in here set up to do facial recognition. So what you do, you plug it in, it'll boot, and it will pulse like this, and it will just continue to do that. But this camera here, if it recognizes my face, it'll light that light up, and then it will essentially speed up the lights, and they'll cycle through like this until they reach their maximum speed. They'll go pure white, and then this will reset to do it again. It just does that. Wanted to come up with a use for the ESP32 module, so that was my go at it. Just a 3D printed enclosure. There's some banana jacks, a bunch of LEDs, some IDC cable. So here's another thing I've been working on. It's a flux capacitor. I've been calling this one my junk one, or my one from scrap, since essentially that's what it is. It's just either scrap stuff or 3D printed stuff. So I actually want to make a much more legit and accurate one, but you know, I have one of the enclosures. I've just been hesitant to cut into it and just haven't gotten around to doing that. So I ended up, we had this at work. It was being thrown away. It used to be for power connections for some of our simulators, and I ended up pulling it out of the garbage and thought I could make a, you know, essentially test fit of a flux capacitor. So that's what the box is. The top, I know this is supposed to be metal, but I was working on the sump pump, and I had this spare elbow that already had some PVC glued into it, and it was really short. It was only, I don't know, when it was cut off, it was probably only a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch left. So I figured I'd use it for this. So I just knocked off the high points, hit it with a little bit of paint, and then glued it in there, and it actually works pretty well. It's a little bit tall, but again, for being scrap, it's fine. So the enclosure here, you can't see it from this angle. This is a piece of ABS plastic out of a screen case that was thrown away. And then most everything else in here is 3D printed. These are tip jacks out of some old military surplus that I had when I was growing up. And then I have some just random wires soldered onto them, pushed through here. These are spark plug wires. I had to buy those online. They're actually excess from when I plan on making the real one. And then this is 12 gauge copper, awesome, just from Romex wire. But yeah, everything else there is 3D printed. So these valves, those are 3D printed. These are printed on the SLA machine, and then these little brackets are also printed on the SLA machine, glued on there, and then painted. These are my, say, not as good tubes. So those are all printed on the SLA machine out of transparent, and then sanded and polished. And then I inserted the copper in there and glued those on. I took some reflective ducting tape, not duct tape, but the metallic stuff that you use for vents. Put that on both sides here to help with the reflectivity. And then these, actually impressed with those. Those were, I needed something quick. I didn't have the boots. I have one set of boots, but I don't have enough for 2 capacitors, so I figured I'd just 3D print some. So they just pop on there. Nothing's really stuck. Let's see, I don't want to pull them off too much, but they just pop on there. But yeah, the first go around, I modeled those up and printed them out of some red PLA I had loaded in the printer at the time, and they came out really well. So I didn't do anything to them. I just printed them and stuck them on there, not sanded or painted or anything. And then inside a Arduino Pro Mini again, I just have it set up in a loop. So this is an old USB cable for, I think, for a camera that I don't have anymore. So you just plug this in, it boots up, and then I have it. I do this pulse, so just yellow LEDs stuck in there. It'll accelerate. I'll close the door. The effect. So it kind of pulses. You get a little bit of light bouncing around in there, which is kind of neat. And then once it reaches full speed, you get the other lights that light up. So dimensions aren't really accurate to the real one, since the dimensions of this case aren't really right. I had to kind of fudge them. But again, for first go around, it was pretty easy. So it's on an infinite loop like that. It'll rest for a while and then start back up. I've been thinking about kind of linking these things together, because I've got, got the speedometer, I've got the other time circuits. I'm working on another set. That's a much more involved version. But I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever put them together in a car, and I really don't want to have to travel super fast to make them go. I was thinking about maybe having them talk wirelessly together or wired. I'm not sure. Again, just stuff going through my head, but I got several little projects I'm trying to work on and get going. So, but yeah, this is the scrap flux capacitor. Another thing I made just for fun was this. It's completely static, not functional, nothing moves on it, but it's entirely 3D printed except for this screw head and this screw head. So the upper portion from here over to here and including this, I think it's this part here. That's all printed on the FDM machine out of PLA, and then everything else is printed on the SLA machine, just because of the quality of it. I couldn't fit this other piece in my SLA machine. I didn't want to break it up, but it's all 3D printed, glued together. I had some problems with shrinkage and kind of figured all that out. These panels again are just printed on the SLA machine. And I painted them with the spray paint, and then I used some 99-cent Walmart acrylic to kind of give it this little pattern there. It doesn't look exactly like wood, but it was interesting. The screw heads are from the old door hinges from the house. I actually just cut them off and just glued them in there, so they don't actually hold into anything. Everything's held together with glue. This piece, I don't know, I printed this out of a, I think it was the Elegoo low odor gray resin, and it's pretty brittle, so I'm a little concerned about that. I've since changed to a different resin, but it's, sitting in a box or sitting somewhere to look, it's fine. Trigger doesn't move. This is all just static. I was thinking of printing another one, but you can see the optic here. This is printed in the top piece. The tube, which again was an SLA print, these two end caps, and all this stuff is just glued on. So everything's static, nothing moves. All these are glued on. And then a little rub and buff for color. And the only other project that I have done was this guy. So this is from your Jurassic Park. So if we, I just took the can and emptied it, pop that off. And this is all 3D printed. This is supposed to move down. My spring's a little stiff, but if you pop it, it kind of pops up. These little vials, I haven't filled them with anything yet. They're centrifuge vials, but you can pop them out. They have little O-rings in top. But those all go in here. And this is actually a Meyer branded one. Couldn't find the Barbasol one for some reason at Meyer. They only sold it in a 7-ounce can, and you need a 10-ounce can. So I used the Meyer one, and then I printed off, someone on the RPF had this label they had made, so I just printed that off the other day. Super 77 did it on there. This is all PLA plastic, except for the O-ring here is printed out of TPU. Figured I might as well to get that on there. I went to Walmart and I found the actual Barbasol, but you can see they changed the design quite a bit. I don't like the sheen on this label, but I have it now. It's done. Thinking about maybe printing another one or something, but it's not a big deal. I know someone asked me the question, do they actually have foam in them? No, they don't. I have to empty the whole thing out. I essentially empty the whole thing out, and then I just used a regular can opener to open the bottom, and it popped right off. And the 3D print fits perfectly, so it's not like super snug, but it stays in there. Yeah. And then I've got a couple other projects I'm working on in the basement, but that's about it.